lot from the Shanahan and Lynch.
Far away.
The Brandon Aiyuk stuff, I think, is top of mind based on, what Kyle said about, and he was asked, well, you could have had 2 defensive tackles who were high priced, and I guess you couldn't afford it. And Kyle interrupted and said, well, we could have, but then you got to sacrifice another player or 2 players and a draft pick and all the rest of it. And it had me thinking about what you mentioned last hour about the Tyreek Hill trade and how Kansas City, they traded one of the best receivers, if not the best in football, and they got 5 draft picks, 4 they've made, and of those players, they all were key pieces, and they have one more pick to go in that trade. So it had me thinking about a possible Brandon Aiyuk trade.
Did they only get I feel like they got more than that.
I thought they got 5. Well, initially it was 5 picks, and then they've turned some of those picks into other
additional picks. Okay, yeah. I mean, McDuffie and Rashee Rice are the headliners of
Sky Moore,
right?
Darian Kennard.
Yeah.
And they have defensive tackle Keandre Coburn.
Okay.
And they have a 5th-round pick this year.
And they have 2 Super Bowl rings.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it just the way he answered that was, well, we could have kept 2 high-priced D tackles, but we chose not to.
Yeah.
And, if you do that, then you got to give up a player or 2 players and a pick. And it just had me thinking about what this might mean for Brandon Aiyuk. If other teams want him, you might be able to get multiple picks and be able to, restart this thing. And you're in a spot salary cap-wise where you're going to be not up against it, but there's going to be some hard choices that have to be made pretty soon.
Lynch admits there are some challenges with regard to keeping all the high-priced players. We'll give you a 1-2 punch here and then get to your calls with regard to what Kyle and John had to say about the future. 2 key people. One is Brandon Aiyuk. Here's what John Lynch said about that.
Yeah, you have to prioritize all these things. Brandon's entering his 5th-year option. Brandon's been a fantastic player for us. Kyle calls him a warrior all the time because of the way he goes out and competes, and that shines through anybody who, whether you're a trained eye or whether you're a fan, you can see the passion he plays with. You can see the production that he's had. We're extremely prideful in what he's become, and he should be as well. And so your team is comprised of guys, veterans who've been paid very well, of guys who want to be played very well. We got one guy on our team who pretty prominent who can't be played very, real well right now because the CBA doesn't allow. So it's all one big puzzle. We've developed a good cadence over the years, Kyle and I, where he focuses on the season. We do all the planning, and then we present things to him, and we work through it. And that's what we'll continue to do. But of course, you want a guy like Brandon Aiyuk to be a part of you going forward.
Yeah, so that not as glowing and as firm as a Brandon Aiyuk fan would have hoped. I'll say that. And then I don't know if you have you bet on the statement you made that Steve Wilks will not be the defensive coordinator next year?
I didn't know you could bet on it.
I don't think you can, but I didn't know if you wanted to. You should have done it before this press conference.
Odds are dropping.
Well, the odds are falling. Listen to, again, the tone and the way Kyle Shanahan asked if they've thought about Steve Wilks' future.
No, that's stuff that, we'll talk about a ton as this week goes. We'll talk about a ton in the offseason. Where we want our team to be, our defense, our offense, special teams, and that's a lot of conversations, a lot of film, a lot of personnel or salary cap, things we got to discuss, drafts. So, no, we're just haven't even watched the game yet, to tell you the truth.
Okay, so he brings up the game. He does not talk about Wilks directly at all. He sort of makes him sound like just any other assistant. And then there was a follow-up. So, Kyle, I missed it. Did you say that Steve Wilks would be back or not?
Is Steve Wilks coming back next year?
Right. I haven't talked to anybody yet, so yeah, I expect all our coaches to be back.
I'm always interested in the very first thing that people do when they get asked that question. Listen again. He just starts making noises.
Is Steve Wilks coming back next year?
Right. I haven't talked to anybody yet, so yeah, I expect all our coaches to be back.
Right.
That's 2 times they were given an opportunity to say Steve Wilks is coming back, and they wouldn't even use his name.
Right. And if you look at Steve Wilks' career, his recent resume, 2017, Carolina, 2018, Arizona, 2019, Cleveland, 2020, no job, 2021 Missouri, 2022 Carolina, 2023 the Niners.
Yeah.
Steve Wilks is a bouncing around, one and done kind of guy.
He's a wanderer.
Yeah. Shout out Dion.
But I'd also say this. Steve bounces around and whatnot, but that sort of makes it sound like it's up to Steve, and that's not how these answers felt. That's not how these answers felt at all. I've used the word discord without knowing it.
Right.
It feels like there's discord, and now it really feels like there's discord. Before we go to the phones, let me also add one other thing that we just watched together in here from a few hours ago, courtesy of David Lombardi's Twitter. But Brandon Aiyuk was asked simply, what will you remember most about this group? That was the question. What will you remember about this group? The video goes on for 1 minute, 2 seconds, and Brandon shares no more than 5 or 6 words. He spends 30 seconds simply trying to speak. Then he does, voice quivering hard. He's got sunglasses on, so you can't see any tears, but it's clear that he's welling up. And all he can really muster is group of guys trying to be champions. Then he loses his voice again. Someone tries to step in and save him with a follow-up question. He sits for another 20 count and looks at everyone and says, "That's all I got." Completely overcome with emotion. And is that someone who is, again, just feeling the anger of what's just taken place, or is that someone who's feeling like he's no longer going to be in this locker room?
Could be both. And just, knowing what we've known about how he's comported himself and those closest to him following the game and seeing that felt like a guy who didn't feel like he'd be in that locker room again. It felt like he had already made up in his mind that he's done here and he's going to go somewhere else, which is curious because he's under contract and his salary is about to triple, if not quadruple, in his 5th-year option. I think he goes up to $14 million in year 5. So the option is nothing to sneeze at compared to what he's made already in his career.
Let's see. Where are we at here? Unrestricted free agent in 2025. Yeah, the base salary does. It goes from
3 and change.
2.3 million.
Oh, wow.
Just the base, but there's also the signing bonus. So you're right. 3.9 is the cap hit. But next year it goes to 14.1.
Right.
So that's a big jump. But it's also extension time, and Brandon on the open market, that's 25. That's 25.
Yeah, it's 25.
That's a $100+ million deal.
That's on the open market.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he's not on the open market. He's on the closed market.
That's correct. However, he's on the no market if they don't do it.
Correct.
He doesn't show up.
But also, and I don't want to get into this now in February because we can kick this thing around in March, April, May, and June, and hopefully it's resolved before that. But he doesn't have the same leverage as an unrestricted free agent does.
Correct.
He's got almost no leverage. His only leverage point is that I'm not going to play. And, that's leverage.
Right. But
that's definitely leverage.
But you're right that means that a person who has essentially only made, and I say only, but has made about $12 million in a 4-year career is staring at 120 and next year staring at 14, and he's going to be like, nah.
Right.
I'm good.
Right.
Unlikely.
Over a lack of targets and hard feelings over a championship that you didn't win. And lack of targets, if you look at the playoff games, 3 catches, 3 catches, 3 catches. So I do think that it's more than just the Super Bowl. He had 9 catches in January, 1 touchdown, and 1 route that I'm sure he's watched back about 97 times.
I've already watched it too many times.
Me too. And if Spencer Burford slides to the right, slide to the right. Then maybe Aiyuk gets that ball, maybe not, but they win the game.
Montoyo in the city. Doc Pandy is in a couple minutes. Hey, Montoyo, what are you doing?
Hey, I'm just outside enjoying this Bay Area weather.
Good for you, man. You love fresh air.
Yeah, I need it. I was just thinking about Aiyuk, and, receivers are always tricky, especially when it comes to contract time. You don't know if they just out there for the money Are they just really expressing how they feel? You know, I think about Aiyuk, you think about it, it was, you know, his rookie year, then the next year it's the conference loss. The next year it's the conference loss. It's the Super Bowl loss. I know that has to be chewing him up inside, always getting close and never getting it. And now he's probably at the point where he may be just doing this just for the money, or he may just be doing this because he really is trying to win and he feels that he plays a key part in winning.
Well, here's sort of what maybe pulls all of your comments together, Montoya. Thanks for the call. I think you have a point. Receivers by nature are upset, especially after losses. But think about it, and I don't mean that to say that they're all divas, because they're not all, but they're flashy. But here's what really I think matters: the position they play calls for someone else to set them up. So they can't do it. You can't just run. You don't get paid for that.
Right.
You've got to be on the other end. And therefore, who's your quarterback? Who's your play caller?
Right.
All of this stuff affects your money. But you are just running. You're just out there. Like, it doesn't matter if they don't call your number, and that affects your stats and your money. So I think that's why they tend to be loud, boisterous, really firm with the contract holdouts, because it's like this feels like it's out of their control
completely.
But you can also see talent when it's there, and Brandon has it.
Right.
So that I just think by nature they're upset because they can't put the ball in their hands. Someone's got to do it for them, and everything that goes with their career is based on that.
And you've got a coach who threw the ball the fewest number of times in the regular season this year. You don't throw the ball like other teams throw the ball. So you're a first-round talent, and you are number 7 in the league in yards. You had a great year, and you get to the playoffs, and you don't get the ball much because Kyle Shanahan, 21 personnel, and you don't throw the ball. And if you look at pass attempts in the NFL, they were 32nd in the NFL in terms of the amount of times they actually threw the ball, let alone threw it to him. And you ran down the targets earlier, which was great. And I think you had him at 26th or 27th in targets and 7th in yardage. So when he gets it, he's making plays. And I'm sure if you're Brandon Aiyuk, you're thinking, what if I was in Miami? You know, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek. Or what if I was in Dallas playing opposite of CD Lamb? What if I was in Detroit, a team that throws it a bunch with Amon-Ra? What if I was in Chicago, even if I was their number 1? I'd be getting a lot more action in those places.
36th in targets.
36th.
36th in targets.
Man.
7th in yards.
Right. Second in yards per catch.
Think about
YPC.
that. Yeah. He had fewer targets than Trey McBride, the tight end of the Cardinals.
Who?
Yeah.